Hey everyone, I'm your host, Sefki, and today we're going to be talking about something that unites all of human history from the ancient world to the present day. Mistakes. Specifically really expensive mistakes. Throughout history, some mistakes have not only been bad decisions but have also had huge consequences costing trillions of dollars. We often think about history in terms of grand narratives, but it's important to remember that history is ultimately a story about people. And people make mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes are small and easily forgotten, like the time I tried to make pizza dough without yeast. It did not go well. But sometimes those mistakes have far-reaching and devastating consequences. So today we're going to be looking at some of the costliest mistakes in history, from financial crises to environmental disasters to military blunders. We'll explore what went wrong, why it mattered, and what lessons we can learn from these mistakes so that hopefully we can avoid repeating them in the future. Let's get started. In 2008, the global economy went into a tailspin due to bad decisions, risky bets, and subprime mortgages. Banks handed out mortgages like candy, even to people with shaky credit. These subprime mortgages were bundled into mortgage-backed securities. Traded globally, they seemed safe as housing prices rose. But many defaulted when interest rates rose. This triggered a chain reaction, collapsing banks and businesses. Governments had to step in with massive bailouts to prevent a complete meltdown. The 2008 crisis showed how small risks can have catastrophic consequences. Our next stop takes us to Ukraine, 1986, to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Now, nuclear power has always been a controversial topic, and the disaster at Chernobyl is a chilling example of just how badly things can go wrong when it comes to nuclear energy. In the early hours of April 26, during a safety test gone wrong, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl plant experienced a sudden and catastrophic power surge. This led to a series of explosions that blew the roof off the reactor building, releasing a plume of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The Soviet government, initially slow to acknowledge the severity of the disaster, eventually evacuated the nearby city of Pripyat and began a massive cleanup effort. Firefighters and other first responders, many of whom were exposed to lethal doses of radiation, worked tirelessly to contain the disaster. The Chernobyl disaster had a devastating impact on the environment and human health. The long-term effects of radiation exposure led to increased rates of cancer and other illnesses, and the exclusion zone around the plant remains uninhabitable to this day. Chernobyl stands as a stark reminder of the potential dangers of nuclear power and the importance of safety protocols and transparency when dealing with such powerful technology. From a disaster that did happen, we now travel to one that, thankfully, didn't. As the year 2000 approached, a sense of unease, even panic, began to grip the world. The source of this anxiety? A seemingly innocuous little problem known as the Y2K bug. You see, back in the olden days of, the 20th century, computers often stored years using only the last 2 digits. So 1998 was stored as 98, 1999 as 99, and so on. The problem was, what would happen when the calendar flipped to 2000? Would computers think it was 1900? This wasn't just a theoretical concern. Computers controlled everything from traffic lights to power grids to financial systems. If they went haywire, the consequences could be catastrophic. So governments and businesses around the world poured billions of dollars into fixing the Y2K bug. Programmers worked tirelessly to update systems, and people stocked up on supplies, fearing the worst. And then, nothing happened. Or at least, not much. The Y2K bug turned out to be more of a whimper than a bang. Sure, there were a few minor glitches here and there, but the widespread chaos that some had predicted never materialized. Chapter 4. Saddam's Folly, the Invasion of Kuwait. Our next costly mistake takes us to the scorching deserts of the Middle East, where in 1990, Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq, made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. He ordered the invasion and occupation of Kuwait, a small oil-rich nation bordering Iraq. Hussein claimed that Kuwait was historically part of Iraq and that the invasion was justified. However, the international community condemned the invasion, and the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution demanding Iraq's immediate withdrawal. The United States, under President George H.W. Bush, formed a coalition of over 30 countries and launched Operation Desert Storm in January 1991. The Gulf War, as it became known, was swift and decisive, with coalition forces quickly defeating the Iraqi army and liberating Kuwait. The cost of Saddam Hussein's miscalculation was enormous. The war resulted in thousands of casualties, both military and civilian, and caused widespread environmental damage due to oil well fires set by retreating Iraqi forces. The financial cost of the war, including military spending and lost oil revenue, was staggering, reaching into the hundreds of billions of dollars. Chapter 5. Bernie Madoff, the Wizard of Lies. From the battlefields of Kuwait, we shift gears to the gleaming towers of Wall Street, where a different kind of disaster was unfolding. This one involved not tanks and missiles, but deceit, manipulation, and the largest financial fraud in history. The perpetrator? A seemingly mild-mannered financier named Bernie Madoff. For decades, Madoff ran an investment firm that promised impossibly consistent returns. He cultivated an aura of exclusivity, catering to a select clientele of wealthy individuals, charities, and institutions. But behind the facade of respectability, Madoff was running a classic Ponzi scheme. Instead of investing his clients' money, he was simply using funds from new investors to pay off older ones, all while pocketing a hefty chunk for himself. The house of cards collapsed in 2008 when, amidst the global financial crisis, investors began asking for their money back. Madoff, unable to meet these demands, confessed his crimes to his sons, who then turned him in to the authorities. The scale of Madoff's fraud was staggering. Investors, many of whom had entrusted their life savings to Madoff, lost an estimated $65 billion. The scandal sent shockwaves through the financial world, shaking investor confidence and leading to calls for greater regulation and oversight. Chapter 6. Fukushima, When Nature Strikes Back. Our next stop takes us to Japan, a nation known for its technological prowess and resilience. But on March 11, 2011, Japan faced a force of nature so powerful that even the most advanced technology could not prevent disaster. On that day, a massive earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Japan, struck off the coast of Honshu, the country's main island. The earthquake triggered a devastating tsunami, with waves reaching heights of over 130 feet. The tsunami slammed into the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, overwhelming its seawall and flooding the plant's backup generators. This caused a catastrophic meltdown in 3 of the plant's reactors, releasing radioactive material into the environment. The Japanese government ordered the evacuation of over 150,000 people living near the plant, and the disaster had a profound impact on Japan's energy policy, leading to a shift away from nuclear power. Chapter 7. Alexander the Great, Too Far East. For our final costly mistake, we travel back in time to the ancient world, to the year 326 BCE. Alexander the Great, the Macedonian king who conquered much of the known world, had led his army across Persia and into India, seeking to reach the eastern edge of the world. Alexander's campaigns had been nothing short of remarkable. He was a brilliant military strategist, and his army was renowned for its discipline and effectiveness. But his invasion of India proved to be a costly mistake. After years of campaigning, Alexander's army, weary from battle and exhausted from the heat and monsoon rains of India, was on the verge of mutiny. The soldiers, longing for home, refused to go any further. Reluctantly, Alexander agreed to turn back. The journey home was arduous, and many of his soldiers perished from disease, starvation, and attacks by local tribes. Alexander's Indian campaign, while adding to his legend, had cost him dearly in terms of men and resources. It also sowed the seeds of discontent within his empire, which, after his death, would quickly unravel. So there you have it, a whirlwind tour of some of the costliest mistakes in history. From financial meltdowns to environmental disasters to military blunders, these mistakes serve as cautionary tales, reminding us that even the most brilliant minds and powerful nations are not immune to error. Learning from history is critical to preventing the same mistakes from happening again in the future. The costs of these great mistakes should be remembered not only economically, but also in terms of humanity. The loss of life, the displacement of people, and the long-term consequences for the environment are all factors that should make us think carefully about the decisions we make today. By understanding the factors that contributed to these mistakes, by studying the decisions that were made and the consequences that followed, we can hopefully chart a better course for the future. Remember, the only truly unforgivable mistake is the one from which we learn nothing.